All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to tackle Real Estate 101. Whether you're thinking about buying, selling, or you're just kind of curious about how it all works, we are going to break down what it really means to own property.
So you want to buy some property. You've been scrolling the listings, maybe you've even run the numbers. But I got to ask you a question. When you go to sign that big stack of papers, what are you actually buying?
Because let me tell you, it is so much more than just a plot of land with a building on it. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's zoom out and look at the big picture. The absolute machine that is California's real estate market. And, how it all really works in this digital world we live in.
Yeah, it's probably not going to shock anyone to hear this, but pretty much every real estate journey these days, whether you're buying or you're selling, it starts online. I mean, the internet has totally changed the game.
Those big third-party sites, think Zillow, Realtor.com, they are super useful, right? They give you massive exposure, help you find buyers faster, and can bring in some really high-quality leads. But there's always a but, isn't there? The downside is that you might be looking at information that's a little bit behind, maybe even flat out wrong. And sometimes the actual agent who listed the house gets kind of buried in all the noise.
So if the internet is kind of the Wild West of real estate info, then this is the sheriff, the California Department of Real Estate, or the DRE. These are the folks who actually regulate everything. They handle the licensing, they uphold the standards. Basically, they're the official source of truth. Okay, so we've seen the big market picture. Now let's zoom in a little closer to the property itself. Because when you buy real estate, you're not just buying a physical thing. You're buying this really interesting concept called the bundle of rights.
And you got to get this, because it's super important. Ownership isn't just one single thing. It's actually a collection of 4 separate legal rights. Think of it like this. You get the right of possession. That's literally the key to your front door. Then there's enjoyment, which means you can use your property without people messing with you. You also get control. So you get to decide how the property is used. And finally, disposition. That's your right to sell it, rent it out, or leave it to someone in your will. This bundle, that's what you're really paying for.
All right, so you've got the property and you've got your bundle of rights. But what about all the stuff in the house? The fridge, those cool light fixtures, what actually comes with the sale? This brings us to a classic debate, real property versus personal property.
Real property, that's easy enough. It's the land itself and anything that's permanently stuck to it. The building, the fences, trees with roots in the ground. Now, personal property is basically everything else. All the movable stuff, like your furniture, your car, and ownership of that stuff gets transferred with a separate document called a bill of sale. Seems simple, right? Well, it's not always so clear-cut.
And yeah, this is exactly where things can get complicated. It's where a lot of deals hit a snag. We need a way to figure out if something that used to be personal property has now become real property. And for that, we need something called the fixture test.
So picture this. You're walking through a house you love, and you see this gorgeous, custom-built bookshelf that just fits perfectly in this little nook. So, does it stay, or is the seller going to pack it up and take it with them? How are you supposed to know for sure?
Well, the answer, believe it or not, comes down to a simple 5-letter word. A name, actually. To figure out if it's a fixture, all you have to do is think Maria.
So Maria is an acronym, and it's the test that courts actually use to make this call. M is for the method of attachment. How is it stuck on there? Is it just plugged in, or is it bolted to the wall? A is for adaptability. Was it custom made for that specific spot, like our bookshelf example? R stands for the relationship of the parties involved. I is for the original intention when it was installed. But honestly, the biggest one, the one that trumps all the others, is the final A, agreement. Whatever's written down in that sales contract, that's what goes. The contract is always king. Okay, we are almost there. One last crucial piece of this real estate puzzle. We know what property is now, but how do we prove exactly where your property line starts and stops? How do you describe it in a way that is totally, legally, 100% airtight? Now, you might be thinking, well, I have a street address, but legally, that's not good enough. Street addresses can change, but the actual piece of land doesn't move. That's why there are 3 official methods to describe it. You've got meets and bounds, which is like an old-school surveyor's map. Then there's the U.S. government survey, which uses sections and townships. And for most houses and neighborhoods today, it's lots, blocks, and tracts from a subdivision map.
So let's talk about that big government survey system for a second. The easiest way to think about it is like a giant grid that's been laid over the entire state. This grid is made up of 2 kinds of lines that cross each other. Baselines, which run east to west, and meridians, which run north to south.
And here's a wild fact.
For a state as massive as California, this entire enormous grid system originates from just 3 specific starting points. Just 3: Humboldt, Mount Diablo, and San Bernardino. Pretty much every legal description that uses this system can be traced all the way back to one of those 3 spots.
So when those grid lines, the baselines and meridians, intersect, they create these perfect 6-mile by 6-mile squares of land. And each one of those squares is called a township. A nice, neat 36-square-mile block.
And this is where it gets a little quirky, but kind of fascinating. Every single township is then divided up into 36 smaller squares, called sections. But here's the thing, they aren't numbered the way you'd read a book from left to right. Nope, the numbering actually starts in the top right corner and then snakes its way back and forth down the grid. It's a little strange for sure, but it's a system that gives every single square mile in the state its own unique legal address.
And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, a single one of those sections is 640 acres. That's huge. To put it in perspective, remember that 1 acre is about the size of an American football field. So we're talking about 640 football fields. These are the fundamental building blocks that legally define every single piece of land.
So, why do we care about all this, abstract geometry? Because it's not just lines on a map. This system is the precise, unique, and legally unbreakable proof of exactly what you own. It's your ultimate claim to that piece of the earth. So, from the online world where your search begins, to that bundle of rights you're actually buying, from figuring out if the bookshelf is a fixture all the way down to the legal grid on a map, you now know the fundamentals. So I'll leave you with this question. Knowing all this now, what are you going to look for in your next property search?